we're going to give it just a minute or so, but while we're waiting, I do have a couple announcements. The first one is, and this is a great moment to share what's going on in RevCommunity with people you might know. There's a Lady Boss retreat coming up. So women business owners, women leaders, they don't have to be a owner themselves, but a leader, somebody would be interested in understanding growth potential, meet other leaders in the industry, and so on. We have some really amazing ladies that we're talking to from the speaker panel, names that you probably aren't familiar with immediately, but as they come on stage and are spend some time with us in that day, they're just going to be really amazing. So if you know of a lady boss or are a lady boss, you should join us for the Lady Boss retreat. There is a Lady Boss group inside of RevCommunity that we could share the information with you, and I'll send the link in here in the chat so people have a chance to get a hold of the website. The website did launch just recently. I should pull that up right now.
What will the flow of the day be like? What's the vibe?
Yeah, it's going to be really great. Actually, there is a retreat factor to it. So the ladies want to spend some time in the morning, getting to know each other, having some breakfast. There's going to be a key speaker in the morning and a keynote speaker in the afternoon. There's going to be some activities that they're going to do. But my favorite feature is this thing they're calling Nooks. And the Nooks, they're basically these mentor or leaders, the speakers that are on panel as well as others, that are just going to have time available. There's going to be one talking about diversity, another talking about parenthood, maybe leadership, maybe even getting down to some of the issues of being a female leader. And just to know that there's like smaller breakout groups throughout the day available. I love that little Nook idea of this mentorship, mentoree relationships that can take place.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
I know, right? And they're already kind of a group that clicks really, really well. I'm going to put the message right here. Everyone in the meeting can see it. So it's revthink.com/ladybossretreat. But it's lady-boss-retreat is where you can register. But obviously in RevCommunity as well. We're posting this information there. So if you're not a member of RevCommunity, join us at revthink.com/community and find out more from there.
And there's 6 weeks left to buy tickets at Camp MoGraph Australia if you're planning on coming down south. I'll just keep casually mentioning that.
Matt wants everyone to go to Australia. There's no doubt. One more thing that's happening in RevCommunity you might not know about are these confab groups that we have. There are confab groups or small groups, 5 or so, sometimes 8 different people. I'm sorry, 8 people meeting in a group on a weekly basis. I see Phil's face. Phil is one of them. He is in the most international group that we have. This morning we had the original languages were Romanian, Swedish, French, Spanish, and then English. Yeah, that's me. So a great group. Just processing what's going on in the industry right now. We're dealing with how to grow our client base. Is one of the challenges we're all facing right now. So talking through it, and it goes beyond just the philosophical or this one-to-many thing that many of you are familiar with. We kind of go deep, and we're actually doing some consulting. So people this morning were asking questions, heavy hitting, and there's a meeting right after this with more of the West Coast group, right after this meeting at 3:00. So 3 different time zones over 2 different days. We'd love for you to plug in there if that's interesting to you. And if you are a newer business owner or a smaller business owner and you want to be part of a small group, we're going to launch another one coming April. And we have a person that wants to be involved and growing that base for us. So that's available as well. So you can hit me up, tim@revthink.com, or join us in community to find out more. But we'd love to hear and have you be part of the conversation that we're taking place in small groups. It's an easy way to kind of be connected and get some advice and help you deal with these business issues that are coming up.
Yeah, they're really great. What's the next book you're reading?
Oh,
in
again, yes. I didn't get to announce that this morning, but the next book is called Getting to Yes. It's this thought process of what it takes to negotiate, and being a pattern that is that you can get into the other side and consider the other side as you're negotiating. I like that for negotiating, but more just the process that the authors go through to understand the other side. And I think in sales, we often don't realize how often we're negotiating against ourselves and not really listening to the other side first. So we downplay. We actually take losses because of that. So it's a great book to just start considering the other side of the equation as we're wrapping our head around what we're trying to offer, and obviously in a value-based proposition, really important.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
But let's talk about cash flow clarity, a very big issue.
I'm gonna try to do this in a short time. I'm gonna spend like 15 minutes explaining this and then answer any questions. Last week I had a lot of great follow-up to the idea of the cash flow cliff. If you were here last week, you know what we're talking about is at the end of a cash flow board that you might have, the visibility of the cash you currently have with accounts receivable and accounts payable, that you're often can see the end of a cycle, the end of a moment. Hold on here. I'm going to share my screen. I can show you where it is.
Just getting us jealous about the Lady Boss retreat.
I know, really, right? I gotta hide these Zoom control here. So at the end of a cash cycle, there's this moment where the account receivables drop off, and we don't have any further AR here. There's a danger in this that I call the cash flow cliff, which is often there is secondary or long-term AR supposed to be sitting here. And when we see a cliff like this, it's when we burn through the first payment the client gave us, the short-term AR, and we are burning through the second payment the client owes us, the long-term AR. And when that long-term AR starts disappearing completely, we basically use a kind of savings account that many of us don't realize we've been leaning on. And an easy way to think of it is the first payment the client gives you, if you have 50% of all revenue going to your production expenses, the second 50% going to your company expenses, you are basically using those company expenses up, that company reserve up. So any new money that comes in that goes to production expenses, I actually have a big gap in covering the short term with a new project coming in. I'll burn through those production expenses with that first payment, and I have a really big gap to cover those company expenses. And some of us, that's a large payroll we're trying to keep up with, or rent, or owner distributions, tax payments, things that you actually need that for. You're burning that through for just day-to-day expenses. So we talked about that cliff last week, this cliff right here, and what that impact is. The big follow-up I anticipated last week when I predicted we're going to talk about this week, and many of the questions I got over the last 7 days were about like, yeah, but what about sales? Because when new sales comes in, it starts to fill in this gap, which is exactly right. But now there's like a myth that happens, and mostly because we're not very good at calculating in our own brain, we really overestimate the power of sales and those early payments for sales, and how much of an impact that those early payments will have on our cash flow. So I want to show you that today as we talk about the sales myth, or the incoming revenue myth that's there. I'm sharing with you a cash board that we use at RevThink. We have a lot of these boards that we've made for many of our clients. And if you don't have a cash board and you would like one, we have templates available for everyone. Just send me an email, tim@revthink.com, or if you're in community, just DM me. I'll send you a link to get that cash board. It has the instructions and talks you through what's there. And some of these formulas are built into the cash board for you already. I'm going to do this real quick because I already did this last week, but just so everyone knows what we're looking at, you'll see that all cash boards start with the beginning cash balance. And then there's usually an expense area. In this case, you can see 3 of the lines, but on this cash board, you actually has has a section for upcoming production expenses and then these operating expenses. I'm just reducing it down for this presentation so we can easily see that there's basically that, like, yeah, expenses. So with the cash we have on hand and the expenses we have this week, at the end of the week, we'd have 51,230 remaining. That cash remaining becomes the starting balance next week. And then we add to next week's starting balance any receivables we collected in this week as well. So any money that came in this week, in this case, 103,000, we add that to, and then next week's starting balance is 154. And then it repeats itself again, minus expenses, new balance, and so on. And you get this cycle of money coming in, money coming out, and what your checking account balance would be, or anticipated would be, in a few weeks from now. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks from now is what we're trying to look at with our cash board. It gives us an ability to see into the future and then solve problems before it become in the present. And we often want to see this cash flow be net positive, 6 weeks, 8 weeks from now. And we do all we can to fill in that gap. So that's what we're looking at here. I do have some expense items all kind of compressed, but I've left a few open. I'm going to show you how these work too to get rid of this myth. But first, let's just look. We've looked at the accounts receivable. We can see that this company has a lot of money coming in, about, I don't know, this case, but this is a fictional company, by the way. This is just made up. This is a very common pattern. I'm not taking it out of nowhere. They have in this section of the cash flow, about 471,000 coming in. And then the long term is just 33,000. So a very clear cliff that they're having. But they're also seeing a negative right here, just 4 weeks from now, there's a negative balance and it continues to shrink. It goes up a little bit here, but then a few weeks later, after a couple payrolls, it starts to shrink again and goes down super negative. So their situation would be that one of the first places we look, is there any expenses that we can cut back to solve this problem? Or is there any accounts receivable that we can move forward to solve this problem? So one great example might be with what's missing here, this $24,000 item is calling a client, let's make one up like this one right here, and asking Pulse Picks, hey, can we get our payment sooner? And then that moves up sooner. And then obviously I just bought myself 2 weeks. If I can move a few of those up, I could add time until I go negative. But my overall total negative balance that week remains the same as I move the money forward. I still have this negative 42 no matter what, right? Because eventually it catches up. So that's one thing we often talk about with clients, is that any way we can move accounts receivable up to just buy us more time until some other factor, some new project could come in or work happens. Another is if I dove into some of these production expenses. In this area, these are anticipated production expenses. So we haven't yet spent this money. And if I can theoretically remove freelancers and keep our staff and not spend this money, I could also reduce what this negative is. I might need to move some of my accounts payable around, skip a week in order to make a payroll. Happens every once in a while. And by moving things just by 7 days, we'd contact the freelancers, let them know what we're doing so that they're not caught by surprise, but just give us the 7 days we need to buy ourselves the time to solve long-term cash flow problems with new projects in-house. So I've done, let's just leave it as like this right now, that we could move this accounts payable and modify and get rid of freelancers. Or actually, let's not. That's an extreme situation. Let's go down to the situation we want to, but we are looking for anything that we can do to cut back expenses first or move revenue forward. Those are the easier two things to talk about. But today we're going to focus right here in the middle of this cash board. What this is, this is manual here, but what this means is really these sales projects that are coming in sooner than later. And we have this little mechanism where we can turn on or turn off this row to be part of our calculation or not. You don't need this feature. This is just an easy way for me to prep this sheet so we can go through it quickly.
And why do you want to turn those on and off?
Well, we turn them on because what would happen is if this So by turning this to say yes, then this 45,000 is included in our AR for that week. So you'll see right here, it was 26,000. But if we actually won that project and we got that first payment of 45 in, now I would have $7,000 in accounts receivable that week. So I can see the impact of sales immediately.
Yep.
And I work with the sales team to kind of prep the, we'll say, closer projects, the one we're expecting to close sooner than later, and anticipate what that AR might be. Some projects are smaller and they'll pay sooner and they get finished. They get done sooner. So this is a $24,000 that would come in a 6-week cycle. We might not always take smaller projects, but if we needed this revenue at that time, we would. Some projects are huge. They would be a gigantic impact, but the second payment or the first payment can be so far out that the short-term cash flow issues won't be solved soon enough with that. So that's what this yes and no does. It just lets me kind of look at different scenarios of projects that are possibly coming into the company and what the impact of that sales would be. And this is where one of the first myths are with cash flow. I'm just going to use the first line here, aerial logic. And by the way, I just made up these names too. These aren't even real client names. But aerial logic in this $45,000. So this would be a $90,000 project. One of the first things I've learned is that when we say a $90,000 project, our mind wants to add all $90,000 to this cell right here. Because we go, cool, that would give us 90 grand, right? Right. It would give us 90 grand, but it doesn't actually come in this way. This is what our mind goes, oh, all of our problems are solved. What we get is $45,000, the first payment in, and then the second payment of $45,000. So one of the first things you have to recognize when you're adding sales, even if you're doing it in your mind, is you have to recognize you're only going to get half of that money in-house. So that's really important when we're anticipating covering certain debt. Like this $67,000 problem is not solved with a $90,000 AR because it doesn't come in soon enough. The second payment doesn't come in soon enough to take care of that. So that's one of the first myths is just like in your mind, when you're mentally calculating it, keep in mind what the payments are going to be as they come in, not just the total value of that project. Sometimes I feel like we really obsess on something like it's 90,000, it's 90,000. And we get really obsessed on this one project, hoping it comes in with a lot of effort, and it doesn't actually solve our problem when it shows up. And we're very disappointed. And we're a little bit confused of like, I don't know, I just spent all that effort in that big pitch to win that 90 grand thing, and that didn't solve my problem. So we want to pay attention to that part of it when we're doing our calculations.
Yeah, Lewis was just saying he's suffering from the 90-day payment cycle grind as well, on top of that, where, you're pitching hard, but then it takes forever for the money to even appear.
Yeah, what's unfortunate is that's what that $90,000 project in Lewis's 90-day cycle is. We're getting the first payment way too late. It'll be great when it shows up, but it didn't show up in time at all to solve this $14,000 problem, did it? Even if I can get them to pay net 30, which would show up here, and then, I don't know, 30 days after delivery, which might be 60 days from now, we're looking at really long cycles that our clients are putting us into for AR. So we have to be realistic. Sure, the win is great, but how soon will we get the money and how big of a difference will it make? That's the first myth. That's the first issue.
Yeah.
Here's
What's the second myth?
Yeah, the second one is this. This money actually isn't all ours, is it? I mean, as soon as this 45,000 comes in, there are expenses attached to it. So we often don't calculate what the expense related to this AR really means on a cash flow basis. We can see it in our budget. We can see, hey, look, Tim, I have 50-50 splits. So I know that in a $90,000 project, 45 is going to go to project costs, creative costs, and the other 45,000 is going to go to company costs. I can do that, but I want to know when. Like, when do those costs come in and when do they leave? Because one of the next things after I have one of these projects is I have to net out what percentage of this payment goes out, almost cash flow this project. That's what this section of the cash flow is doing. These are projects. If I had my AR down here, this is revenue. These are expenses that's attached to the revenue I've already earned. But with sales, I need another mechanism to do that. One really easy trick is to just add another line and subtract out what's not going to be available. So, not going to be accessible to us for cash flow. So I'm going to put this in very general terms, but your staff is already covered on this cash flow here in salaries. So if I want a $45,000 project and I'm only using my staff, no outside expenses, well, I'm okay then by leaving this zero because my expenses are already realized on my cash board and the revenue coming in helps cover that. But many of us are also using outside expenses. And we didn't know what portion of this is actually geared towards or being sent toward outside work, knowing that we don't net that out. One easy calculation I put out there is at least half of every AR should be considered out of house, just as a placeholder. It seems you'll know if you've done any kind of corporate budget or factors report, knowing, and if you watch the video or part of this conversation 2 weeks ago that did the bulletproofing profits, you would know what that percentage is. But what I do here is I just basically multiply this amount or divide this equals this number divided by 2. And it gets me that like net loss or cost associated to sales. And if I do that across the board, every time I add a project, I'm doing that here, then I can start seeing what the impact of my sales is. So before I thought this was going to help me this next week. Wow, it would be so great to have this in. But in reality, I have to net out this thing to only 22,000. I can impact my other expenses. You can see like, oh, there's not that much available to solve that problem. And it takes a little bit more calculation, but that's the second myth that we have to overcome, is that all of the money is available to us. It's not all available to us. We have to be able to use this money to produce the project to get the work done. And if you don't know what your math is, we can figure that out with you. But we need to know that is and realistically net out this sales with the expenses attached to it. So if I did that again across the board here, I'm going to, instead of just doing it on a one-off project, I'm going to run a calculation that says, because I built my sheet this way, that this sales revenue I bring in here, divided by 2 is what I'm going to net out, copy it across all these rows. Just one second. So now every time I turn on one of these rows, I can see that, yeah, this $12,000 comes in, I'm going to net 6 in expenses, and now I have an impact there. All of a sudden, I can see what our benefit is of winning a large project, 108,000, and what it really costs us, what we really gain in that moment. Now I know, many of you are going to tell me, the day I win this project and the day this AR comes in are not always when the expenses come out. But most likely they correlate. If this is a net 30 payment and you've hiring crew or staff and you're paying them net 30, we're getting really close. If I was really working with a production company and I had this one issue right here, I might offset this by 1 week and then allow that 1 week kind of stretch to buy me the one time I need to get through this pay cycle that I need to. But overall, you can still see I'm netting out that cost. So I can see realistically, and I'm just putting placeholders in place because I don't want to over anticipate what these sales are going to do for us and then pull back or hold on or not do what I need to, which is come up here and make those harder decisions, like not use freelancers for a while, only use staff.
Got a quick question from Phil P. Tim.
Yeah.
Phil asks, how do you differentiate the recurring expense that you'll eventually pay with your credit card to the credit card line itself? It seems as if both are falling in different places, so you eventually have to have them twice.
Yeah, exactly. So some of these are, what I always put in the credit card line are what I know will be like production related expenses. And then there are other items that correlate or fold into it. And when that happens, realistically, like, let's see if I'm looking at a credit card line here. A line of credit here, credit card right here. This $5,000, is something that I know like is a recurring like production expense. Really like a placeholder or like a placeholder for what seems to be regular expenses for production. And some of these other items like my phone bill, repairs and maintenance might actually show up into that credit card. So the day or the week this credit card happens, the balance actually might be like 14,230, but these items wouldn't be part of the calculation. So I would pay like that. So I modify this. I just put placeholders into the future so I know these areas are covered and not missing. But when I actually pay it, I actually drill down and say, cool, those items are deleted. It's all here in credit card, and I move on that way.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the second myth. The second myth is, oh, go ahead, Matt.
Any other myths? Is there a third myth?
Yeah. So the first one again is just and expecting that we're not. The first one is looking at the money as is all going to come at the same time and not recognizing the payments and how those payments, the timing of those payments, have a big impact on our bottom line. The second one here is not netting out the possibility of it. The last one and the big one is we got to be realistic. Sales don't come in. And now it seems like people's win rates used to be 50% to survive. It feels like now the win rate's 25 or 30%. So more often than not, these big projects that we're saying, wow, this would really save the day, the likelihood of that coming in seems less likely today than it's been in the last couple of years, maybe last 10 years even, if I were to be honest with you. So I have to be realistic. One thing we really, really do damage with our company is we're thinking sales is going to solve all the problems. Reality is we have to be able to solve the problems without sales also. So I always start my cash flows with my clients with everything turned off. Everything's a no. And I want to know if we don't get sales, I know we're anticipating them, but if we don't get them, how are we going to get through our next payroll cycles, 2 payroll cycles, 3 payroll cycles? What are we going to do to get the company healthy and stay viable to buy us the time we need to bring in those sales? Are we prepared for that? Are we asking ourselves the hard questions? And if that's true, then we start diving into some of these other areas, like how we use freelancers, or worst of all, what are these staff people, these temporary staff people, these people that we work with all the time and have our retained knowledge. When is it smart to start talking about those kind of cutbacks? Don't let sales blind you. Don't let your savings account blind you, but don't let your sales blind you and say, hey, we're going to be okay. The next project's going to come in and save the day. Those projects don't come in as often as they do. And so we need to know realistically and be prepared for some other scenarios than just hoping the next sales is going to get there and then putting our head in the sand and not solving the problem for real. So at 3 different clients talked to me this week, or 3 different companies called me this week and asked me to walk through those scenarios, those other bad scenarios, ones that have to take, some strategy into question here of who I should let go, how soon can I keep them going? Should we furlough them? Should we drop them completely? Should we ask them to change their rates? All these other possible scenarios to get through those cycles. We have to be ready to ask those questions. And maybe it's not always easy to do that with as you by yourself. I totally get that, or just with a business partner or 2. But to have an outsider that's willing to kind of systematically, clinically almost walk through some of those questions, because it can be emotional for you when you're going through it. So prepare for the hard questions. Okay, that's my presentation. That's the things I want you to think about, because we can be very blinded by sales. We can anticipate incorrectly the net value of it, and we can really hurt the bottom line when we're not doing it well. I want to be available to answer any other questions that you guys might have about this, because it's getting pretty important and pretty valuable to do this well and do this right.
Yeah, it's tough taking those blinkers off. It's hard facing up to the realities of these things.
Absolutely.
I'll switch to gallery view. Let's see. Anyone got any questions? Jason is out there striding the Melbourne streets again.
Yeah.
Facing reality.
I think Jason commutes at this time in the morning.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as easy to answer questions because of just the topic that we're covering. But I want to make sure it's available to you. Here's the thing that's going on with sales right now. There's the pattern of conversation seems to have grown, I don't know, built up, or seems to be more frequent than it has been for the last 2 or 3 months. One date I hear very frequently is I haven't worked since August. So there was something that took place Q4 for many agencies that Q1 looks like it always does, kind of slow, but coming into a dragged last half of the year or last quarter of the year is what really has the impact. And then Q2 is commonly a time where things are picking up, and that seems to be matching the pattern. So that's good news. But to me, this familiarity that we are to having those sales come in, and oh, good, the refreshing moment that we're getting those phone calls, and then knowing we're going to win it. That's where that second thing I've been observing is important is that it doesn't feel like the win rates are the same. And if the win rates are not the same that they used to be, even though the pattern or the buildup is equal to what it is, we got to be very careful and start thinking about what that impact could be on our top line, and therefore what we need to do with our expenses to get through this year.
Yeah, Lewis is saying he's got a lot of people asking for his forecast, meaning freelancers.
Yeah, meaning forecast, meaning just like how are you looking at the rest of the year, and are you gonna be busy?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, what's coming up?
Meaning how I'm looking at the industry writ large, like, they're calling me saying it's slow, and they're asking me, how do I feel about the industry? And do I think they should pivot and things like that? The amount of people who asked about pivoting this year was kind of striking.
Yeah, the pivot conversation is pretty interesting. And I from my point of view, I can hear companies in different segments, each wanting to pivot to the other person's segment. So I'm the one who's like, well, you can talk about that, but from what I hear, it can be slow as well. I'll tell you again, though, the anomaly that pops up is a large tech company called one of my clients this week because of AI and their exposure to the AI space. They find their stock prices go up and down based off of different news, and they've been combating it with their own news cycle and basically working hard to produce a new news cycle. That's the background. For my client, their client said, can we just give you more? Like, how much can you actually handle? And so there are some, and this is not the only one, but there are some agencies and some studios that are being handed 3 times, 4 times more than they've ever had from one client because of this trust value. It's almost like, I've worked with you long enough, you can read my mind. I need you to really quickly get a bunch of stuff done or handle these big projects because I don't have the team I used to have around me. So I say that because some of us are thinking, well, some people are making it, some people are doing something different. What's the difference? I think those are long-term relationships. You can't necessarily crack into those scenarios without having the year or 2 years or 3 years of background of knowing what it takes to get those projects done, and then be handed that body of work. But it is one of those different cycles happening out there as well. Is when a client wins one project, they seem to win 3 more right on top of it from the same person. So that's where, like I've been saying, go back to your known entities, known clients, and find out what they're thinking, because those are where the first fruits are really going to come from. The new reach out is going to be harder to win because everyone's looking.
Yeah, Lewis has had that same situation where he's just asked to handle 3 projects, but with a discount. And he lent hard on the Blair Ends idea to do discounts right.
Yeah, right. Good for you. Well, I think Blair is great. Blair has a really good sense of the value proposition, and have that voice in your ear is really great. It's also something to listen to. It's like, we're not going to discount just for the heck of it, just because you're a junior producer trying to show off. But if what's been impacted is finances, and there's a financial impact happening in our industry, to adjust to that might be another way of thinking of discount. So I think you have to know, and Lewis, I'm not telling you it specifically, I'm just saying, generally speaking, there are some financial shifts happening, and we have to be smart and listen to what those financial shifts are. You all are also looking for innovation yourself to gain efficiencies and grow, and be a new company and pivot. So we're all kind of like building up those kind of reserves and that kind of knowledge ourselves.
And also finding ways to market differently. Like how do you tell some of these old stories which haven't been told for a while? Like not everything, like it's hard to think of marketing when you go, I don't have anything new and exciting coming in, but maybe it's a time to start talking about a golden story from the past and tell this story of being a safe pair of hands, of trusted relationships you've built, and keep making noise. Because I think, you know, with all this stress, some people go very quiet, and you've got to be a squeaky wheel.
Yeah, that's one of the things that came out of our small group, is this thought of, you know, we often want to say we're experts and use our expertise to win over a project, win over a client, but how do we actually express it? Like, what are the words we actually use when it comes to expressing expertise? And some of it, we want to say it's our story. It's, hey, I worked with Ridley Scott, trust me, you know, Ridley Scott 20 years ago or whatever, trust me. And you go like, well, you're old, but does that mean you're capable of doing what I need you to do today, right? That's got to be one of the questions that clients asking you. One thing I like to do is bring up the idea of expertise can see patterns or have theories or methods to get things done. So one would be like, hey, I'm looking at the problem, and my theory is, based on my expertise, that here's what's necessary to get this project finished. Or here's what the technology evolution is going to take us, and we should anticipate that as we build that into this project. Or my theory is, if you're cutting back costs, what we need to do, or the reason you're doing that, and you kind of add that kind of words to the language in your pitch, and it shows your expertise, but you're actually expressing it in theory, meaning you have processed it. Your experienced mind has processed it and put something new out there as part of the giveaway or part of the value proposition. That's another kind of just easy words to capture that value without just using your demo reel and showing people like,
Yeah,
worked hard for many years.
Yeah, and moving beyond, I just won an award, or I just hired someone, or here's a new thing I just did. I think it can be really hard to figure out what to say next if you're freaking out about these sales myths.
Yeah. It's why I like that people are asking Lewis, the people asking you questions, because they're looking to you as the pattern person, and you're recognizing something and can express it. Clients want that trust, and that's why clients go, Lewis knows what's going on. I can trust him. I can give him a call if I need to, and that's a push for you. All right, how'd we do? I know we're always kind of running late. I don't want these things to be cut off too soon, because if we're talking about big things and important things, hey, you know, if you are literally dealing with this and this is necessary for you to talk to, can you just reach out to me? It's tim@revthink.com. I have space available. We can find a half-hour meeting. I don't charge for my half-hour meetings. Just get on a call with me. Let's figure out what's going on. If I have a tool that you can use, I will give it to you. If there's things that you need to learn, we can talk about how to get that implemented with you and your company. But I'd rather have you talk to me and solve this problem than think you have to do it yourself. Just don't think you have to do it yourself. That's what we're here for. That's what Matt lives for. That's what I live for. It's what Jason lives for. It's what Jacob lives for. We're doing this all the time. We're happy to do it. And we want you to survive. So this idea that we exist so you thrive in business, life, and career, we put that to work every day, especially in moments like this. So please take advantage of that. We want you to be part of our community and be thriving, healthy, and strong.
Truly. Stay strong, people.
All right, go find a lady boss and tell her to come to the ladies retreat. Join a small group if you're not part of it, and reach out to us if you need any of these tools or conversation. But thank you for being part of the weekly briefing. We're glad you're here. I'm glad we're processing this together. If there's anything else topics you'd like to hear, conversation you want to have, feel free to throw that in the community and we'll put that out there for you. And thanks, Matt.
See you again. Oh, pleasure. Pleasure as always. See you later. See you, Jason. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.